Well, morning, Judge Shapiro. Afternoon.
Hello?
Good morning. Good afternoon, Judge
As
Shapiro.
usual, I can't figure anything.
Oh, there you go. My webcam is wonky right now, so I'm not going to put
Hello?
my video on. Are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me, Judge Shapiro? Are you able to hear me?
Christy, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
But I can't hear you. So let's see. Are you muted?
Nope.
Oh. Well, they gave me this new thing here. Maybe I should just unplug it. This speaker. And it'll come out of the computer, right?
It should speaker. It should be the speaker. Turn the speaker up. Maybe turn the speaker up.
Ah, there we go.
Yay. Yay.
You're a
Okay.
genius. Okay. Thank
All
you.
right, awesome. All right, so both work, and then I'll wait for the court reporter is here right now, and then I'll wait for the parties to get here, and I'll let you know.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you're gonna take off shortly? Oh, it's 1 o'clock, we need it 3.
I mean, if you want, then.
No.
Security says to leave that road in your clock.
Probably. It's in that little hallway over.
Got it.
Okay.
Judge Shapiro, the parties are here whenever you are ready. Judge Shapiro?
Yes.
I do have all the parties here whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm reviewing some of the relevant documents. I should be done very quickly.
Okay, and then there is an Elizabeth Neville in the room or wanting to come in the room. I don't
I don't know
recognize her.
who does she represent?
It doesn't, she's not listed on any of the documents.
Could you ask her why she's
Yep.
here? Thanks.
Yep. Yep. Judge Shapiro?
Yes, ma'am.
I haven't received a response back from Miss Neville. She does have her hand raised, but I can't get to it until I promote her.
We'll go ahead and promote her and I'll ask her.
Okay.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Neville. Can you tell me why you're here? Who do you represent?
I represent EWI with Lynn Gandhi. I'm her associate on this case.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, very good. Thanks. Sorry about the confusion.
No problem. Thank you so much.
I would have explained, Elizabeth, but I had not yet been promoted, so you couldn't hear me, nor was the chat enabled.
So do we have everybody who's going to be here
I believe so, Your Honor.
on each side and a court reporter? All right. We're not on the record quite yet. Yeah, that was it, actually. Yeah, we can go on the record.
On the record.
All right. I'm going to call the case, Court of Claims case 22-34, Exhibit Works v. Michigan Department of Treasury. We have with us, excuse me, Ms. Elizabeth Neville and Lynn Gandhi on behalf of the plaintiff, Brian McLaughlin, and David Thompson on behalf of the defendant. And we have cross motions to compel in this case. And I'm happy to listen to whatever you have to say, but I'll give you a little bit of information and way maybe you can help me here. I've read everything and I don't really understand. I'm sorry to say. And part of it, I think, is that I can't seem to find the spreadsheet anywhere. Did anyone submit the spreadsheet that was prepared by EWI from which much of the discussion ensued?
Your Honor, I believe that was an exhibit to our motion.
All right, hang on.
This is exactly why Elizabeth's on that call. It's a lengthy motion. I'm going to try and find you the exact page number. And that would have been an exhibit in our response to defendant's motion.
Okay, hang on. That was just filed on October 6th, right? Your response to the defendant's motion to compel.
Yeah, October 5th. October 5th, yep.
Okay, close enough. All right, well, I'm scrolling through it and maybe I missed it. Hold on.
Maybe we did not attach it.
No, the spreadsheet itself was not attached to our response, but I'm happy to pull it up now if you'd like.
Can you put it on the screen?
Yes, give me 2 seconds, please.
We put it on the screen and yeah, I don't really know how any of this works. So
This is why we have young people.
and they kick out the old ones eventually, smartly. So while Ms. Neville's doing that, let me say my understanding is that essentially you guys have disputes over a significant number of claim, delivery, and installation charges, and the defendant says the plaintiff isn't telling us what the reasons are on these specific ones we've asked about, and the plaintiff is saying, essentially, what do you want from us? You've never told us why they were disallowed. I'm not sure those two things are contradictory. But I guess, frankly, my inclination sitting here and being confused is to just grant everybody's motion.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to understand better before I do that. So while Ms. Neville is doing that, why don't we first proceed with the state? All right. What is your position on both the motions?
Sure, Your Honor. Well, so I think as far as our motion, I think you accurately captured it. There's a new law that came down, right, requiring Treasury to cancel in certain instances delivery and installation charges. We had sought a limited discovery period, as you know, and you granted us to basically look into this question. So, and I want to credit plaintiff's counsel as well. There are competing motions here, but we have, I think, been able to work together to achieve some things here.
I can see that.
Yeah, and so I appreciate their efforts in that respect. Where we kind of ended up was, we said, okay, tell us what you think is delivery and installation. What is it that you think should be taken out of the assessments? We got a listing, and then we said, okay, tell us why these are delivery and installation in your view. Why do you think they're exempt under the law? At first, the conversation was very aggregate and there were a lot of charges. So we kind of discussed and we agreed, well, you know what, instead of looking at everything, let's just pick out individual ones, right? So that it's a little bit more manageable. So we did that and we said, okay, so here are some charges, here are some specific dollar amounts on invoices.
That's what you asked in the 5th set of interrogatories?
Right. So why are these delivery and installation, why are they exempt? And so far as we can tell, and plaintiff's counsel is here, obviously, and perhaps I imagine a very different view will be articulated. But so far as we could tell, that the answer to our question of why was, well, just look at the spreadsheets of our exemptions. And so our question was not, we had a twofold question. Number one was, what do you think is exempt as delivery and installation? And then number two was, why do you think it's exempt? And I think we have something of an answer to number one. We're just still looking for an answer to number two. And that's what our motion is about.
And are you looking for a document? What type of documentation would you hope to get?
Sure. So you'd want to first see invoices with separately delineated line items, but if it's not, because you can see something on an invoice, Your Honor, but it won't necessarily be clear based on the description. It won't be clear exactly what it is. So we were looking for a little bit more detail. Okay, so for a particular line item charge, why is that thing delivery and installation? How do we know that it is? So we were just looking for something more of a description behind the surface level invoice description, if you will, if that makes sense.
Let me interrupt for just a moment. Are all of the ones, the examples posed in the 5th set of interrogatories, are they all examples of disallowed claim deductions?
Your Honor, that's a separate, the disallowed deductions. I actually think that's a misnomer. I think that gets more into what plaintiff is after. And I do have something I want to say about that as well. But I think that's a separate issue. This question of the disallowed, I'll say purportedly disallowed deduction, because I don't think that's really an
let's just call it disallowed. I'm not holding anybody to anything in terms of the definition. It's just a shorthand term.
Sure.
So in other words, the interrogatories, for example, number one refers to the $38,966.
Right.
So do we know whether or not Ms. Hardiman approved or didn't approve the deductions in that one?
As of now, Your Honor, that's something that would not have been removed, because again, if we would need to know why is that delivery and installation. If we know and it's separately delineated and itemized, then that's something that we would remove. But we don't know, because the only thing we know right now is it's an entry on a spreadsheet. So we can't know as of now.
Well, maybe I didn't ask the question well, but I'm sure Ms. Gandhi will be talking about what Ms. Hardiman said and didn't say.
Yeah, I actually,
you can continue. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. That when it came, so the delivery and installation was part of that kind of that limited scope discovery period that we had. And as far as I know, I don't know that plaintiff actually asked us any questions about. I don't know that there was any discovery from plaintiff's side on that issue. So that was something that we looked into, just to say, okay, we will remove these things from the assessments as the new law requires. We just need to know the detail behind it. So
okay. But these are not all of them. These are exemplars, or this does cover everything.
Correct. Like these are exemplars. We're just things that we pulled out to say, okay, if we know why these are exempt, then hopefully we'll have a better opportunity to understand systemically why all the other things that they identified as delivery and installation, we would know something about them too.
All right. Ms. Gandhi, you want to respond? And if Ms. Neville is able to put that up at the same time, it would be great. But if not, we'll look at it after.
Len, if you just want to tell me which spreadsheet I should pull up, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah.
Well,
do you have a selection, Your Honor?
I just don't even know what it looks like and what type of information is contained in it.
Why don't we just maybe pull up the one that has at the bottom, where Kendra went through and had like 5 or 6 different tabs. I believe these were the specific invoices Mr. Thompson just referenced, so we can.
So the spreadsheet that we had identified is entitled, it's for the 2013 year. It's entitled Summary of Services Activities Disallowed as Delivery and Installation.
Uh-huh.
Okay, this is a different spreadsheet, I think.
This looks like an
Why don't we pull up
individual.
the one that was I think it was called Audit 2015 Cover Worksheets. That's going to be a lot of data right there. Go to the 2015 covered worksheets. Perfect. Okay, so Your Honor, we would agree, and I would just start by, we filed our motion to compel first, and I agree with Mr. Thompson. We're all seeking the same information, and both parties are a bit hampered here, I think, because the auditor who performed the actual audit is no longer with the department.
If I may, I'm sorry to interrupt, Lynn. I hate to be rude. I don't think this is the right spreadsheet. If we're still talking about our motion for delivery and installation, that we have, so you guys had a spreadsheet that was strictly a summary of services activities disallowed as delivery and installation. So I think it was narrowed to just that one thing.
Is that the one that had like blue and green and?
That may have been, and I hate to be rude. It's just there. I want to make sure that we're kind of talking about the same thing when it comes to our motion and limiting it only to the delivery and installation piece.
So, Mr. Thompson, can I suggest maybe while I'm speaking, you could look for the spreadsheet that was this attached to your motion? That might help us find it. But maybe as a exemplar, we could look at what was provided.
Yeah.
It's referred to in the emails. Of course, now I can.
And my apology, I'm just waiting for fairly large data folders and files to load here.
Okay. All right, well, Ms. Gandhi, why don't you continue with your argument?
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. So I believe everyone is looking for the same information.
Yeah, I have it, and I think I'm just about to bring it up here. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Our client was asked by the department, and we have worked collaboratively together to say, you know what, the auditor left. Can you give us your kind of best guess of what we believe the auditor disallowed? We'll just go with the word disallowed. And we said, we will do that. We'll ask our client to do that. And our client went, and at the bottom of this spreadsheet tab, those numbers at the bottom refer. David, can we go back to what I was talking about?
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. If we're talking about the delivery and installation piece, Your Honor, this is the spreadsheet that we were talking about. So,
and this
so like the 38,966 you were mentioning just a moment, Your Honor, that's in this spreadsheet. So just to, I guess, to keep the conversation ordered in accordance with your question, this is the spreadsheet that we would read.
And who prepared this one?
I don't know. This came from plaintiff.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to Ms. Gandhi, and you can put up whatever you want on the screen.
It's okay. I can tie this together.
Okay.
The spreadsheet right here that Mr. Thompson is referencing is simply a summary that counsel prepared to give a total for each year. Let's start at the total for each year, and then we can get to detail for each year.
Okay, so these numbers represent the amounts that you believe the auditor said you're not getting a deduction for that.
Right. And the notes in this note column, there were 5. Each one of these is a summary of 5 other sheets provided to the department. This is the total. I did one spreadsheet to just say this is the total because we were asked to give them how big is this bread box question. But each one of these has a spreadsheet by year that tells you how we got to the total for that year. So this was just a summary to accompany the 5 other spreadsheets that had already been provided.
And are those available, that can be
Yes.
put on screen?
Yes, so here Ms. Neville has pulled up, I believe it was the 2015. So David, I don't know if Mr. Thompson, if you need to stop sharing. So if we can go back to Mrs. Neville's sharing.
I believe when you go to share, it will ask you to continue, even though it stops my screen share, and you just click yes, so you can replace mine.
Okay, so now we know what this was. This was a summary sheet provided subsequent to providing spreadsheets for each year.
Okay.
So if you look at the very top of this spreadsheet, it tells you this is the 15.
Right.
All these tabs at the bottom will then sum to that 15 that was on Mr. Thompson's spreadsheet. And what our client did is this spreadsheet is all of 15, and at the bottom is the actual client work number. And then the
Yes.
client by work number, which is what our client needs to get to that very detailed transaction level, said, here is everything on that work order. And our best guess of what the auditor did, because we never got a summary from the auditor, we got a partial, and then it was everything else.
Okay, let me stop you there for a second.
Yeah.
Here's where I'm puzzled. Why
Yeah.
do you need to know what the auditor did in order to provide information on your own transactions?
We were just trying to, we knew some of it, but not all of it. You're right, we don't need to know what necessarily the auditor did, so our client started with everything on that work order, as you can see there, taxable, non-taxable.
And do you have something like this for each of the claimed invoices? I'm not even sure what to call them.
For each year, we broke it down by work order so we could get to this transaction level detail.
Mm-hmm.
And Elizabeth, if we could just go back to what, I don't know which one this is. Okay, so just hold on this on 16. This is 16. You see at the bottom are all the work orders. And when we were asked by the department, tell us the amount and then tell us why, this is where in the column labeled non-taxable,
Yes.
we told them the amount and the why. On some of these, we felt they were explanatory. Transportation, we didn't need to duplicate in the why transportation because the description gives you sufficient.
Right.
And everywhere that we thought the description needed a bit more, our client went in and tried to explain that this was not the sale of a product. It was labor and other services that are either non-taxable because the statute does not specifically tax them, or they're non-taxable because they fall into this bucket of which there was superseding legislation, transportation delivery. So this is why we're perplexed when we hear, you didn't tell us the amount or the why. But then we're also hearing, well, we want more than just what's on the spreadsheet. We want like an invoice. These amounts, again, my client is in a business of providing a lot of services and product. You're auditing us, you're not auditing the providers of these labor. If you want to get to, quote, the underlying invoice of, let's say, work performed by another, that was detail that's provided during the audit. There is detail in the general ledger. But what has been asked of us now and how we responded was, source documentation in electronic invoicing world is going to be a link into our client's general ledger system of some of these numbers. There's no piece of paper. Could we give you a screenshot? Perhaps, but now you're asking about a lot of bulky information. And our suggestion was, to the extent you don't feel comfortable relying on our spreadsheet here, which indeed is how we keep books and records in the normal course. Let us have someone to come out to our client's site, you know, a treasury and accounting, the person who does this, because we just can't download you a version of the general ledger. It's too big. You won't be able to onboard it. You won't be able to move through it quickly. We've proposed that if there's any doubt as to credibility of this information. But this information, as you can see by the bottom, maybe Elizabeth, you can flip through some of these work orders, was all created and provided. So that's where we throw our hands up in a bit of frustration saying, we have nothing more to give you than this highly detailed work order by work order, because nothing, you know, this was our best guess of when the auditor said everything else is what we have.
Okay. Do you want to talk? You can say more about this, but you can also please talk about if your motion to compel is still alive, you should address it.
It should. So what all we said in our motion to compel, which was before we did this work, originally in our motion to compel, we said we had a partial exception list. And while we might be able to back into the number of everything else, number one, we believe that Treasury has the responsibility on an assessment to identify which of our transactions they're subjecting to tax. We do understand that there's a presumption of a correctness, but under case law cited in our motion, Consumers, our Gillette, Treasury does have to point to specificity. You can't say it's all the rest and you should know your records and you should be able to figure out what we're taxing. So we did this work and we've said, this is our best guess. Can you look at it and tell us yes or no? Was this what the auditor taxed? We don't know. You know, in her deposition, she referenced her records and her notes. And after her deposition, when we said to Treasury, please provide those records and notes so we can verify, because again, it's not just the amount, but why it was disallowed. The why is what we need. And we don't have the why. We're making our best guess. We believe.
And why do you need the why? So that you can respond specifically to the concern?
So I can defend against the assessment. I can say non-taxable service or installation or other.
Right, or out of state or whatever, yeah.
Right, I think we came to agreement of out of state of all that. And so we said, we'll go through and do this work. Our best guess is to the why. But really the why is on Treasury to say. So these were done after our motion to compel, when we're trying to work in good faith, when we are trying to avoid a hearing or a trial on this. All this work was done. And I understand if Treasury says, you know, how do I test your own worksheet? But, you know, that's really, if you could say with specificity, do you have something to show us this labor being billed by a third party? But to do it for all of these work orders, we're back to an audit, which we're willing to have an auditor come out, but the burden of trying to get even further back to the next layer, we believe that was done already in this. Boxes of documents were provided to the auditor. I understand that was not the AG's. We could duplicate those boxes. But it's a lot of tedious work to go back to every purchase order. We don't know what more we can give. That was our response, like to the department's motion, like, look what has been provided by year, by work order, plus a summary. That very first sheet Mr. Thompson pulled up was really to take this worksheet. There was one for each year.
Put it all together.
Yes.
Right, I understand. These are not exemplars. These are the full amounts for the years in question.
Yes, you got to go to the other spreadsheets, one for each year, and then go to the tabs at the bottom that sum to the year, so then you can sum the years to this summary.
Can you go back to the one that was on a second ago? Just remind me what column E and column F are, because it's not on here. Okay, total taxable amount,
Right, so
non-taxable.
taxable is the amount that the client has said, and I have to remember to go back, that was the client agreed taxable, like amounts were paid or amounts were billed and remitted. It's these non-taxable amounts, we believe, go scroll all the way to the bottom. We believe where we had, you know, differences. You can ignore the agreed exceptions. There were some that were agreed to, but again, originally taxed, the amount that we think should not be taxed, and where we disputed with the auditor. We are trying to be as transparent as possible.
Okay. Okay, if I go back to defense now, Ms. Gandhi, or you got more?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Thompson, first of all, do you agree that the interrogatories you're seeking to compel refer to the summary on an annual basis, not individual transactions?
Your Honor, that's how it appears based on what we're looking at here. I mean, so Ms. Gandhi, she spoke very well. The question of how do I test your worksheet? She mentioned this would be very tedious work to go to every purchase order. But Your Honor, that's kind of what the law is asking us to do, right? It's asking us to figure out those invoices where you have delivery and installation separately itemized. And so I understand it might be, and I understand there's a lot of volume here. I get that, but that's kind of what the law is asking of us. It's not.
But you didn't disallow everything. Your auditor disallowed certain ones, which would be a lot less tedious to respond to if they knew what they were.
Your Honor, if I might just speak generally to that question of disallowance. So,
okay,
and I think that gets more into plaintiff's motion, but just to kind of clarify things. So the way that this audit was conducted, this idea that there were disallowed deductions is kind of, it's a misnomer. It misunderstands what happened. So the plaintiff in this case, they didn't file any SUW returns, sales, use, and withholding returns, until I believe 2015. So the auditor's kind of left with a significant vacuum of information, and she's just doing the best she can to put together what she can. And then when they do have SUW returns that they file, the auditor notices that the reported gross sales amount, which is the beginning of your tax base computation, right? That's your starting place. She noticed that the gross sales amount didn't tie to anything. So they look to see, does the gross sales on the Michigan return, does it tie to the federal return? Does that number match? And she noticed that the numbers didn't match. So gross sales is not matching. So what did she do? She basically looked at the gross sales per the federal return, and then that includes everything. That's sales.
That includes D&I.
It includes everything. It'll include sales in other states. It will include all services. So but that's her starting place, is sales everywhere. And then she starts taking everything out. So first she takes out sales in other states. That number comes out. Then if there's direct pay charges, those come out. If there are other charges for which there were exemption certificates provided, those come out. So and at all this time that the taxpayer and the auditor are having this exchange, whenever the auditor is given information that says this is a tax exempt charge, she takes it out. So she's taking all of this stuff out. The taxpayer claimed, I think, something on the order of 10 million in deductions. The auditor ended up giving them $87 million in deductions. So we gave them about $77 million more in deductions than they asked for. So this question of disallowed deductions, if something was demonstrated to be an exempt service or exempt charge, the auditor took it out, and she took it out to the tune of several times what the taxpayer actually asked for. So if you want to understand the process of this audit, it was very simple. You're just starting with gross sales, and then you're just pulling stuff out as it's identified. And sometimes
do we know what was pulled out?
We do, Your Honor. So we know that, for example, sales in other states, we know that those.
No, I mean not the easy ones. You know, the ones after, you know, after the exempt certificates and direct pay and out of state, the ones that we're really fighting about here.
Yeah, so after that, Your Honor, what the assessment just captures whatever's left. So any transactions where they couldn't show, hey, there's a reason for this to be exempt, that's just what's going to be left. So any and all transactions that are left are just those.
But do we know what's left? Or do you want them to basically totally redo the audit on their own? That does seem burdensome, since it's already been done by someone on your side of the aisle.
Sure.
And you don't seem to have what they did.
Well, Your Honor, so I don't know that we need to recreate the audit, and Ms. Gandhi is correct. So the assessments are presumed prima facie accurate, and they just identify what's left after everything else. Now, if there are other things that should be there, and your question a moment ago, you know, why do you need to know what the auditor did to know about your own transactions? Your Honor, we agree with that question completely. I mean, they're the ones who have, like, it's their data warehouse, and their person, Kendra Pond, we deposed her, and she explained, well, we have an entire warehouse and they have the general ledgers. These are things that are within their control. So if there are other things here that they want to bring to our attention, you know, we'd certainly be happy to look at it. But as of now, everything that's left is just the stuff for which there was no proof in terms of why it was deductible in the first place. Everything has come out as, again, 77 million when they claimed only 10 in the first place. So
right. The reason I'm still confused is it still seems that if they don't know which ones you're challenging, then they have to do it for all of them. So you say the ones that were left are the only ones at issue, but you don't identify the ones that are left.
Well, part of this, Your Honor, is that because the auditor is operating without the best possible information, you'd have a state return that matches to the federal return. You'd have a general ledger that matches, and your books and records are gonna match, right? The auditor didn't have the luxury of that because, again, the taxpayer didn't even file. They didn't even have
But putting all that aside, doesn't the auditor write down, this one is no good and this one is good?
Your Honor, I think.
I mean, she came to a conclusion.
Yeah,
she must have had some that she knew she wasn't allowing.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the taxpayer is bringing stuff to her and she's taking them out, she takes them out, and she took out everything that she could. So, but to this idea that the auditor has a transaction by transaction level thing, because, again, there's missing information here. The auditor is looking at this at the aggregate level. What are your gross sales? And then she's just taking stuff out of the taxable amount. She's reducing the taxable amount as she goes. So the idea that the auditor went through in great detail, she wouldn't have been able to do that in the first place, because the record keeping here was, in our view anyway, Your Honor, and I don't mean to turn this into a motion for summary disposition hearing. I'm very sensitive to that, but in her view anyway, the record keeping here was deficient. So she had to rely on other sources, right, to figure out what the taxable base was going to be.
I'm sorry to be thick, but walk me through one more time this thing about, I understand that the numbers don't line up with the Fed return, but from there, what did she do?
So from there,
you said she did it in the aggregate, but based on what?
So let's say that the auditor sees that the gross sales are $100 million. So that will be your starting point. Then she sees, okay, out of that 100 million, 50 million of them are from states outside of Michigan. So she's going to take that 100 million. Now we're down to 50, right? And then she says, okay, well, another 20 million of it is exempt services. So we'll take that out. And now we're left to 30 million. Okay, now we have exemption certificates covering 10 million. So now we're down to 20 million, right? And she's reducing the tax liability each time, right? And some of these things, you don't need transaction level detail. For example, direct pay, the state has a direct pay list it can look at and see all the vendors who are on that list. So we wouldn't need transaction level detail for that. The auditor just looked at it and said, okay, for everybody on this list, I'm just taking those out of the taxable amount. All that stuff is coming out. So it's a process of elimination. You're starting at the aggregate, and then you're just pulling stuff out as you go. And she testified to that. I know on at least one occasion, she actually
But she didn't maintain any record of what she pulled out.
Your Honor,
I mean, I understand one could go back and determine something is out of state, but
Yes.
of the ones that weren't out of state or exempt, otherwise exempt, then she did not, she either didn't determine or didn't make a record of which of the more, let's say, which of the ones where there were questions, she was gonna say, yes, that's DNI, or no, there's not enough proof.
Sure. Well, the DNI thing is a different question simply because the law didn't come into place until later. So she wouldn't have looked at that during the audit anyway. That was something that was only recently passed. We'd have to look at the audit work papers, the audit report of findings, things that have been provided to plaintiff. So our entire audit file, subject to certain privileged items, all of that was produced. So the rest in terms of what is the taxable amount that's left is just the remainder after this significant process of eliminations.
Okay, anything else from your side, Ms. Gandhi?
Yes, if I could just address a few of those points. First, I understand these allegations of deficient records. I do want to point out that in the course of the audit, which took quite a while, complete returns were filed for 2013 and 2014 with all the necessary documentation. So there
Sorry,
was
let me stop you for a second. I presume then that this case, the overall case, involved more than the issue of delivery and installation. There were some unfiled tax returns and the like.
It began as a normal audit. Yes, the out-of-state sales, it has nothing to do with delivery and installation. Maybe I'll say this just to make sure it's clear. We believe delivery and installation had always been this topic of it's taxable if it occurs prior to title passage, and it's not taxable if it's after title passage. And because of all the controversy and the difficulties, did title pass, did it not pass? That is why that legislation was passed. It was bipartisan to say, let's just not tax delivery and installation because it's too much of a grind, it's oppressive. We believe.
And that was retroactive to all pending cases?
Correct.
Okay.
We believed our initial, when we got this audit, was title did indeed pass prior to delivery and installation. So that issue of DNI was there. We were going to have to contest it and have to prove up title passage. When the legislative changed, that's when we reached out to opposing counsel and said, you know what? We believe that a big chunk of this audit is going to go away because rather than proving it all up, we now have the retroactive intervening legislation that just says you don't have to fight about title. Great. So let us go and prove that to you. Gross sales. This is a taxpayer that's a fiscal year. Its gross sales on a fiscal year is never going to mesh with its annual calendar year sales and use tax reporting. And there's a lot of stuff that happens for, again, federal income tax is not the same as sales tax because, and indeed our client does a lot based on project accounting, meaning I'm going to do a project for you. It might span multiple calendar years. You're never going to tie your annual sales to Michigan sales tax to federal. We understand the auditor started there. I also want to highlight that I believe the fact that the auditor gave us 77 million deductions when we only asked for 10 highlights also a very large disconnect between the auditor's processes and how just sales and use tax is complied with appliance. What's left? You hit it directly on your head. Those spreadsheets we showed you is our best guess of what she did. And we're just thinking, we believe she picked up anything that was a service activity, because maybe she thought title hadn't passed, or maybe it just wasn't clear what the activity was. But there is no record. We did get that red, green. You looked at those sheets that had the red, green.
I didn't see them.
Okay.
I just know they had red and green.
Right, they had red and green. What those were, for some of these years, the auditor did provide, and it's common in the auditor says, here's my exceptions report. Here we're disagreeing. And our client went through, and they are the ones who put on the red and the green. They said green is where we agree with the auditor. Red is where we disagree. We
see.
can't tell you from this red why the auditor taxed it, but we can tell you our best guess of what we think why she did. We can
Mhm.
just tell you we disagree. We think these are out of state, they're service activities. So it was our client that went and said red. And we needed to do that because in order to properly invoke the jurisdiction of this court, we have to go through, and everything that's green, we have to pay in order to have, pay. So we did that. We did that. We, the taxpayer. But we never got the auditor to say, oh yes, you're right, this is why. We don't know that. There was no list. There's a partial list. But when we're going to years for which we had no list like this red-green, that's where we go back by work order with line item descriptions. We, in fact, have done this audit, and now the department is asking us to prove up our audit. That's why we've asked for, please send someone out. We can walk through kind of our audit. Otherwise, this will be a very tedious trial. I don't even know, because again, I don't know the why. Even if I can get to the number, I need to be able to say why. There was no sufficient record maintained, we believe. When asked in her deposition, the auditor referenced work papers and her notes. The AG has indicated they've provided us everything in the audit file, and I think therein lies the hole. There was not anything in that audit work file to tell us the rest of this. We've made our best guess.
And so these individual sheets, do those correspond to the red lines?
Oh, yeah, we believe to the most part they do. And to give you an idea, when we say the rest, the auditor just didn't say, I'll tax this, I won't tax that. She went into the work orders, because our client doesn't send the taxpayer doesn't send its customers one bill, right? It's progress billings. Here's everything I did, breaking it down. The auditor didn't say, I'm disallowing that invoice. That would be simple and easy. She basically said, I'm disallowing portions of that invoice. Elizabeth, if you can go back to on the bottom. And we made our best guess of which portions she was allowing and disallowing. No, not that one, Elizabeth. The invoices at the bottom. Sorry, Ms. Neville. The work orders. Yes. This is our best guess. We don't know. So you see all the different line items per work order. Some of that was allowed. Some of that was disallowed. We're guessing. We're guessing she allowed this and disallowed this. Because there was no, with specificity, the department telling us what was a total summary of what was no good to them. We're guessing. And we get the number pretty close. But go back to one that has a lot of line items is probably the best way. Like here's a perfect one. We believe this is what she's picking up as taxable and non-taxable, but we don't know for certain.
So in other words, there are other items in these invoices that aren't listed here.
No, everything's listed, but the treatment as taxable and non-taxable
I see.
is our best guess. We did have a
understand.
listing.
Okay.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yeah, we'll go back to you, and I got a question for you too, but go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Neville, if you wouldn't mind putting up the spreadsheet with the red and green again. Your Honor, a lot of this discussion, again, misunderstands certain things, and the auditor was deposed, and she explained this in her testimony. So what they're identifying as an exception, that word exception has a very specific meaning, and it does not necessarily mean that a deduction was disallowed. And she testified to this. Exception just means the opposite of what somebody claimed. So if somebody claimed, for example, $0 on a deduction, and Treasury thought, well, actually, you're entitled to a deduction on this, and it's an exempt service,
Right.
That $100 is going to be a $100 quote unquote exception.
I understand.
But
It's a divergence from what the taxpayer is told.
Correct. So a lot of what we're talking about with this exceptions report is, again, it's a misunderstanding of what the auditor did. So in many of these instances, it could be that the taxpayer, for example, and I'm trying to read this and it's very small, but for example, the North American Auto Show event, it could have been in the initial, and again, this is not our spreadsheet, at least in terms of the color coding. So I foundation about it, but it could be that in the first instance, the taxpayer did not report the 47,000, or they reported it somewhere else, and the auditor moved it and allowed it as a deduction in another place. So, this is
your spreadsheet. To clarify, the color we put on, but this is your spreadsheet.
Okay, and I also think the columns L and M we didn't do. I believe you guys added those columns. Is that correct?
I don't even see L and M. Oh, I have my pictures. We scroll over. Hold on.
So I believe they're on the screen. I mean, I can see them on the screen. L and M are just the agree, disagree.
I have to move my pictures. Yes. L and M. This was the departments. This was a spreadsheet from the auditor. My client was trying to make heads or tails. They added L and M to be able to communicate. Do we agree or disagree? The color code. The color is just the same as what's in L.
What does show services rentals mean? Oh, show services. I understand.
Right. This is the client, to give you some context, EWI constructs the displays that you see at the auto shows. That's what they do. So when they say display or a show, the disagreement reason is trying to articulate that this was not the sale of tangible personal property, but it was non-taxable services that were rendered after title passed at Cobo Hall or TSF or whatever it is now called, Huntington Place. This was just a little roadmap to start to make sense of what the auditor, this is preliminary, and they would have gone back and forth with the auditor. And we do have these sheets for the latter years, 2015 through 2019. For the earlier years, we didn't get a sheet that looks like this, a report. I think it says up in that upper left-hand corner, exceptions report. We didn't get these sheets for some of the earlier years. That's what we asked for as well. Because if we could get these for the earlier years, then we can, by line item, tell the department why we disagree with their characterization.
Okay.
Your Honor.
Go ahead. You have the last word, and then I want to ask you both to do something. So go ahead.
Okay. So Ms. Gandhi mentions the earlier years. I think a part of the confusion here is that the taxpayer, Ms. Kendra Pond, was one of the people that we deposed. She testified that for the earlier years, they didn't even have operating software. So that's why they didn't have sales and use returns that they were even filing. They only started that in 2015. So again, the auditor is kind of operating in a vacuum, especially for those earlier years. And she's not going to be able to know the detail because she doesn't have any of the detail. That's something that the taxpayer would have to have. But Kendra Pond testified that they didn't have any working software at the time, and they completely converted their system in 2015. So those earlier years, a lot of this stuff I think starts out with the taxpayer. If the taxpayer has records, that's something that the auditor can look at. But if the taxpayer doesn't have records, it's like asking the auditor for detailed transactions on something that the taxpayer didn't have in the first place. And that's kind of where the two ended up talking past each other, I think, in a lot of these instances. So I think it's just important to know that the auditor can only review what the taxpayer has. And if the taxpayer doesn't have something, the auditor's going to have to look to other things to try to construct a tax base and has authority to do so, right, under tax administration laws.
Okay, before we go back and forth again, and I've got plenty of time, so but I would like whoever is in possession, whichever site created or modified spreadsheets and those invoice reports, I would like you to file some exemplars. Just so I can, see how to refer back to them and say, oh, this is this, not in terms of identification of particular transactions, but to understand what it is. Now, I'd like to know from each of you, other than an order that says you win this motion, what do you want me to do? If you can articulate that. I mean, I don't know when you say describe in detail how they determined this, for example, the defense, what are you asking for?
Yeah, so Your Honor, we would just want to know what went into that. Why? How are we supposed to know that it's delivery and installation? I mean, even if you look at particular invoices based on the description, you wouldn't even then necessarily know what the thing is based on the description in the invoice. So we just need to know why something is.
What is your objection to sending somebody out there and going through their stuff with them?
Your Honor, I don't know that I necessarily have an objection to it. We had this conversation, and again, I want to credit plaintiff's counsel. We have worked together on this.
No, and I believe you. I've seen plenty of ones where you don't work together. So
yeah, and the initial conversation was exactly that. And as Ms. Gandhi noted a moment ago, the GL, for example, general ledger is too big. That's why we asked for smaller amounts that we thought could serve as exemplars. Maybe in identifying the $39,000 based on this conversation, maybe we misunderstood what we were looking at. So we would want to know the $39,000. If that's a summary, then we would need to know, okay, what goes into it. And then we'd have to have specific items.
Don't those invoices that they sent with their spreadsheet constitute an answer to this? Sorry, I'm back to the beginning and still
a bit confounded. They might, but in many instances, Your Honor, it's very difficult to know just based on an invoice. The invoices can be very, very cursory, and everybody has different ways of invoicing, right? They have their own language, so we're not always going to know based on the description what it is. So that's why we kind of tried to streamline it a bit, and it looks like we missed the mark. And I think we probably could work through that kind of thing if we had a little bit more time.
Well, you can have as much time as you want. I'm gone in March.
Okay. Well, Your Honor, so I guess to answer your question on our side of it, the only thing that we're looking for is the delivery and installation piece. So if it required more time to kind of do, and what Ms. Gandhi was saying, right, going through every purchase order, it might be tedious. It might take a long time. However, it's our job always, right, as the taxing authority, we always want to get it right. We're not trying to get more for ourselves or give more away to the taxpayer. We just want the most accurate answer. And if it takes a lot of tedious work, we want to make sure that we get it right. So if it takes more time, perhaps another discovery phase, and then the relationship that we have with plaintiff's counsel, I think, is a good one. I think we do a lot of good work outside of these types of motion devices. So perhaps we could make some progress that way, at least as it pertains to delivery and installation piece of this.
Does Gandhi have a response to that?
So, Your Honor, we have boxes of documents. These invoices were provided in hard copy. The auditor had access to them there. I think part of this is I can give you an invoice and it might say drayage because it's coming from labor guys over at the show place. And I understand it's an industry term, but I can't be explaining business records that we got in the normal course, that we paid an invoice. We feel as if we're being asked to prove up. Like, yeah, you got an invoice and you paid it. But tell me specifically what it was for a transaction that was now 10 years ago. And explain to me what your industry is and what that means. And by the way, this was an audit. Then there was a reconsideration of this audit. And I do applaud defendants counsel for trying to get almost a third audit. But it's tedious now for the third time. We are more than willing to file a very clean set of exemplars with this court that were previously provided. We would like to have someone come out because I don't believe it's necessarily counsel's burden to have to learn how to do an audit and verify an audit.
Sorry, did you say you would like them or you wouldn't like them to come out?
We would like to have an an auditor come out or someone that I think, because to have counsel, the AG's office act as an auditor or like it's one more person in the chain, that this has been done already. This audit has been going on for 6 years. We say tedious. This is a Michigan small business who is attempting to survive. And this is now going through the 3rd audit. So they had an audit, they had a reconsideration, the client has performed a self-audit. For us now to hemorrhage it all out again, I understand the need for proof. There has to be a more efficient way to get the minds that need to understand this on it. That it might be tedious, but when there's lawyers involved, that's costly. And I'm very sensitive to small Michigan business owners. We do believe, hopefully, if we just file these exemplars, I can duplicate the entire boxes that have been given. And I understand that is not counsel for the department. And they are hamstringed by not having that specific auditor there. But
When you say exemplars, what are you talking about?
You said, give me, this is what was provided before, on a work order, the behind the pine, not just the work order is what we build our customers. That's what we're being audited on. You're actually asking the taxpayer to give me your vendor invoices so I can test your vendor invoices.
Mhm.
If you want to audit the vendors, go audit the vendors. All I can do is give you the invoices they gave me. We're really getting behind the invoice now, which is really not the taxpayer's duty here, right? You're trying to audit the vendor of the taxpayer through the taxpayer. We would just like to get some finality, but we have those boxes, we have those invoices, we have those documents. We'll hemorrhage them out to the court. We'll provide them to the AGs. We'll make them as searchable and as easily to read and tied out, walk you through it so we don't get a question on a summary of it to detail. I mean, that's what we were trying to do. But I understand now really what we're trying to test is the invoices my client got.
Is that correct, Mr. Thompson?
Your Honor, I think that's mostly correct. I mean, I don't agree that they've been audited 3 times. I don't think that's correct. I don't agree that we're trying or need to audit the vendors.
Forget about the characterizations. I mean, I'm just concerned with what she's giving you are invoices that come from the vendor to EWI.
Right. So
I want to know.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Your Honor.
Sorry, and so what you're looking for some supporting documentation?
Yeah, I mean, if we had an invoice and, for example, it says drayage on there or something like that, and some invoices do use language like that and some don't. The question would then be, okay, if it's in some instances, you can look at an invoice and you can say plainly, okay, yeah, that's delivery and installation. It's separately delineated. It's crystal clear. And those are easy cases. We could do that. Right. The question becomes, and I think the auditor actually has at this point done that. The question becomes for the harder ones, right? So when you have a description and you don't know what it is,
whether it's all D&I or partially or none.
Right, exactly. And so presumably the taxpayer knows what they're paying for when they pay an invoice. So we would just be asking them that question: when you paid this invoice, what did you pay for? But yeah, I think Ms. Gandhi mostly, aside from some characterizations, I think that we're mostly on the same page.
When you ask,
hold on one second, Ms. Gandhi. You want this for every transaction?
Your Honor, if the taxpayer is saying that something is exempt as delivery and installation, right, we can't just take their word for it. I mean, it's on them, right? Under both the Sales and the Use Tax Act and the Revenue Act, for that matter, it's on them to maintain records and ultimately to rebut the prima facie accuracy of an assessment. So, and auditors can do this in any number of ways. They can do block samples, right? They can take smaller samples and then kind of extract a larger percentage.
She says she went through everything. She didn't. She said it wasn't a sample, right?
Your Honor, I think in some instances it was a sample because there wasn't enough detail in the first place. They didn't keep, and again, I don't mean to get into that dispute here. That's not what we're talking about today. But in some instances, she would have done some sampling. As it comes to the delivery and installation piece, I believe at this point, anything that was patently easily discernible as delivery and installation has come out at this point. If there's more, then we'd be happy to look at it. But again, you'd have to kind of go invoice by invoice, and it may be tedious and difficult, but we have to be precise in tax administration. So.
All right, Ms. Gandhi, I keep saying somebody's gonna have the last word, but go ahead.
Yeah. Elizabeth, can you pull up the one that has the invoices at the bottom, just so I can be clear on what we're providing? Because what I hear Mr. Thompson saying is, if you could just tell us what you were paying for. Our client has painstakingly gone through and done that right here. What I'm hoping I'm hearing is really just, can you now give us all your vendor invoices for these amounts? That is an audit. So you want all our vendor invoice. We've told you how much we paid, and now we've told you what we were paying for. I think catering is, self-explanatory, some of these. So are we simply just missing what the auditor claims she already viewed in order to disallow it? You now want us to give it to you to allow it.
All right, let's stop there. I'd like the state to file at least several pages of what they sent as a spreadsheet, all the spreadsheets, whoever sent them. Let me have, if they're voluminous, I don't need them all. If they're modest, then you might as well give it all to me, but so that I can follow it and understand. And as soon as I have those, I will endeavor to issue an order. So I know you've been waiting a long time and trying to get this figured out, so I'll put it to the top of the pile, but I want to have those in hand. Okay.
So, Your Honor, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Gandhi. I want to make sure that we're working together on this. I think these would be your spreadsheets, right? That would be produced here. I don't know that we would have any that would be.
And hence yes, these are our spreadsheets because we never got a complete spreadsheet from the auditor.
I understand.
So we will give you our spreadsheets, which are our best guess. And in lieu of having a win on our motion or a win for both sides, we really request this court to have a representative of the department who does do auditing, because I think that would be far more efficient and effective for the taxpayer, the AG's office, the state of Michigan, the Department of Treasury, to come to resolution on this, rather than the hemorrhaging of documents and review by counsel and then providing them to Treasury. And then it's a circle.
And you say to review and examine what? Your general ledger, all your invoices from providers?
Right. If the auditor, if a representative can go to the client site, the client, the CFO, can go pull up by invoice. They can pull out whatever they want to test, and the client, and they can cast it onto a big screen in a conference room. We did this once before. This, you're looking for this. They can click into the system. They find the work order. They click, they find the electronic invoice from the vendor.
I understand now what you're saying.
Click. They can boom. We can get through this without a lot of screenshots and copying and PDFs and downloads and bookmarking.
And motions. So
Yeah.
let's say we were to do that. Let's say I was to order, as part of whatever the rest of the ruling will be, that the department's representative may come and conduct a review of any relevant records, with assistance of an appropriate person from EWI. How long do you figure that would take to set up and conduct?
Based on availability, with counsel can attend along with the department. I can't envision that they're going to want to spend more than a day. When you're doing it real time in the system to test accuracy, after 100, how much more do you want to test?
Mm-hmm.
And we let them pick what they want to test.
All right. And Mr. Thompson, what do you think, ballpark, this would take to set up and perform?
Your Honor, I don't know. I'd have to confirm with my client their availability and you know, whether or not this would be the best thing or the most efficient thing. I understand plaintiff's counsel has articulated a position on that. I'm not convinced that it necessarily would be. It could be. It might be something that would be useful. I think it would be. I think it would be useful to maybe start with specific invoices and get some explanations. Maybe just start small, and then if necessary, have a site visit. But you know, I think maybe just a smaller. Hey, let's agree on some of the ones that are in the hard, like the hard bucket, right? And let's maybe get a description based on those. And then from there, if necessary, I think the way, Your Honor, that you had mentioned the order, the department may. I think that would be a great way to put it. But then in the meantime, we have an opportunity.
How many of these do you want? As opposed to all of them.
Oh boy, well, it's hard to know. We don't know what the universe of them is.
Well,
right?
I think that's why she's suggesting doing it the other way.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the idea was we'd start with maybe like 10 or 15, a small collection, and that was a conversation that we had at the outset with plaintiff's counsel, and we agreed on that. And it sounds like maybe the conversation just got lost in translation, and if that's partially our responsibility, that's fine. But we can do a better job this time and make sure that our arrows are, you know, are a little bit more pointed. So I'm trying to see here if we have a trial date. I mean,
yeah, I think we just need to know, what do you mean by the hard bucket? I don't even know what that means. You have
I
to
think I understand the concept, but what's in it is another question.
If you can identify a transaction, we can give you invoices. To simply say, give us invoices for everything that was disallowed, you know, hundreds and hundreds of papers. Can you identify? And we will get you information. But if you just say to me, give me from the hard bucket, I don't know what that is.
Mr. Thompson, would you like to respond? I think we're negotiating here.
Yeah, the hard bucket, Your Honor, and I think you're right, and I think you get it too. The hard bucket are just those things where you have a description on an invoice, and it's just you can't tell based on that description. It's not self-evident. In some instances, it will be. In other,
and you pick out 5 or 10 and say, give us the support for these 5 or 10.
Yeah,
and then if you're dissatisfied, then you pay a visit.
I think starting small that way might be a good way to do it. So it might be that. And maybe we can agree on this, Ms. Gandhi. Maybe you guys produce 100, maybe not 100, maybe say 50, just 50 invoices of varying types of language, right? Various types of descriptions. We'll take a look at it, and then we'll follow up with, you know, okay, so can we get more description? And maybe that's the best way to have this come up. I don't think that would be too burdensome.
I would suggest maybe to make it more even specific of the work orders, with the delineated line activities, whatever is vague to you, if you could identify those. And we'll get, because now we got an invoice that's going to tie to a work order, that's going to tie to an amount. You know, Your Honor, we have dispositive motions, I believe, set in December. And
these can be put off if necessary, but you know,
yeah.
I'm sure you both would rather move this along as best you can.
Yes, I would like to move, because I don't want to get 50 invoices and you're like, oh, well,
now we need to,
as I always like to say, I can provide it to you, but I can't explain it for you. If it says drayage of this, this, and this, I mean.
I understand. What's the word you're saying? Drainage or drayage?
Drayage, you know, like if you go to Cobalt, one guy, you know, it's a union. One guy unpacks the box. One guy moves the box. One guy unpacks it. One guy removes the unpacking. Some of that is to actually pull the box. That's drayage. That's different from the install guy or the unpacking guy.
All right. Well, here's where we'll leave it then. Send me those few pages that you put up here so I can just have it for my file as I go back, and I will get you an order within a week, okay?
Your Honor, do we, in light of this discussion, do we want to, because December's not that far away. I mean, we're talking about, you know, we're talking about a matter of weeks here. Is that something that we want to put off in the meantime, or do we want to keep that on there? In my view, it might make sense to push it out a little bit.
Right. Ms. Gandhi, what's your view? I mean, I know defendants and plaintiffs see things differently in these.
Well, I think in that we're aligned? Because our goal, we believe, if we can satisfy, the majority of this assessment goes away. There's no reason to continue litigating.
Okay, here's what we'll do. I'm gonna get you an order within a week. We'll leave the SD hearings on for December for right now. After you get the order, you should consult each other and determine if you think there's an extension of SD still required, and you can stipulate to it, I'm happy to enter it. If not, Mr. Thompson, promptly file a motion. And if you gotta, if there's a reason that we need to put it off, I'll order it.
Sure. I think that's eminently reasonable, Your Honor, and I appreciate your time and Ms. Gandhi's and Ms. Neville's time this morning or this afternoon as well.
And I appreciate your time. And I'll tell you, being a trial judge is very different than being an appellate court judge. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. I'll watch for those, Ms. Gandhi, and then we'll get you an order. Okay?
Sounds
Thanks,
like fun.
everybody.
Okay, thank you.
you.